Could Ole Miss be the best defensive team in the SEC in 2024? Nah. Well, they are going to have the best defensive line in the SEC.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media on Yahoo Sports. Thank you for tuning in today. Today on the show, we talk about the players Ole Miss has brought in on the defensive line in the transfer portal and how that will take Ole Miss from good to elite as a team in 2024. We look at the Under Armour Atlanta Combine that just happened that had a ton of Ole Miss targets participating in it, and we look at the baseball weekend that people want to forget and have a little bit of group therapy as well. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, and special thank you to the everydayers that make this show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So Ole Miss on the defensive front is in a very unique situation because they signed the best player in the history of the transfer portal to sign in Walter Nolen. They signed the potential best pass rusher in the transfer portal in Princely Umanmielen. He signed, and you have some returners coming in like Pegues and Jared Ivey as well to go along with some backups and an excellent top five worthy high school class that got brought in. Ole Miss is legitimately looking at like 12 or 13 deep on the defensive line. They're not going to play that many people, but we're going to talk about them right now. We're going to start with the transfer players that Ole Miss brought in this season. And let's start with Walter Nolen. He was an interior defensive lineman who transferred in from the Texas A&M Aggies, the former top recruit in the 2022 class. Nolen began to live up to that hype in his sophomore season. He had 7 sacks this past year, tied for third among SEC interior defensive linemen, as did his 8 tackles for a loss. He placed fourth among SEC defensive tackles with a 9.9 pass rush win rate as well. Nolen is staying within the conference and will play at Ole Miss. Now, the other transfer that was big name that was brought in is Princely Umanmielen. Umanmielen was one of 8 FBS edge defenders to record a higher pass rush win rate than Scoutron this season, placing 7th in that department at 22.2%. He is also 8th among Power 5 edges and pressure rate. This year, Umanmielen will join Walter Nolen at Ole Miss on the defensive line as well. Those are the 2 big names that Ole Miss brought in. And what you have a situation is 2 elite players have brought in that you basically moved to the top of your defense. Now, Pegues, everybody knows what type of player he can be. He's extremely athletic, a really good defensive lineman. Now he gets to be the number 3 option on that defensive line, maybe the number 4 option, depending on how you look. When you look at players that are coming back, here's Pegues' numbers, along with his PFF grades and his stats over the year. He had 18 solo stops, had 3.5 sacks as well. Pegues is a really big defensive lineman for Ole Miss. And I think the situation that you're going to have with Walter Nolen coming in, granted, he's a big guy, but I do not know that Walter Nolen is going to play the nose guard position. I think there's a chance that Pegues is actually playing a little bit of nose this year. And Walter Nolen is in the 3 technique slot as in a typical 4-man defensive front as well. Really interesting stuff. If you look at Pegues over the course of the season, you can see that he wore down just a little bit as it went on. He ended up grading out fairly well, but he was sucking up double teams throughout the whole season. And that was honestly his job this year. Everybody was focused on Pegues. Now, if you look at the 2024 defense, they're not going to be able to do that as well. So I think JJ Pegues could be in line to have a really big year. Now, the other returning player that we want to focus on is Jared Ivey. And Jared Ivey, 18 solo stops, 5.5 sacks at his defensive end position. You look at his numbers against really bad teams or real bad offenses, he ate. He absolutely ate against Vanderbilt, against Arkansas, against Mercer. And this is just the statistical stuff that PFF came up with. He graded out at 40 against Penn State. He was the defensive MVP of that game, and they graded him out at 40. See, that's the reason I say you can't just judge off of these numbers. You can't take them as gospels. Use them more of as a guide. If you do that, you will be absolutely fine. Jared Ivey has a chance to be a really big player in this defense because he's going to play that strong side defensive end opposite Princely Umanmielen. And between him, Walter Nolen, and potentially even JJ Pegues, you have a chance that Jared Ivey is not going to see many doubles this season. And we saw against Penn State, if you do not get a hat on a hat against Jared Ivey, he can absolutely disrupt you to the point of just wrecking your offense. And Ole Miss on the defensive line has a front four of what I would call game wreckers. I mean, next level type game wreckers. You got first round picks that are playing in Walter Nolen and Princely Umanmielen, potentially on two spots of your defensive line. And I think JJ Pegues is going to play in the league as well, as is Jared Ivey. All four of those players are exceptional football players, and they're your starting group. That's the reason I say that Ole Miss has the best defensive line in the SEC. This is all top tier. You can project them out at a very high level, but they're not done there, okay? You still have Xxavion Harris. You still have Akelo Stone. You still have DeeJay Holmes. You still have Chamberlain Campbell. You still have pieces on that defensive line that can spell players for 10 to 15 snaps a game to where they can perform at an extremely high level. I do think Xxavion Harris is probably going to be the fifth defensive lineman or the third interior defensive lineman. I think TJ Dudley, who played the Cedric Johnson position of rush end in the Peach Bowl, I don't know if that is permanent. I don't know if they have eyes of him playing a jack position, but if he's learning behind Princely Umanmielen, that's interesting to me at the very least. I think DeeJay Holmes has a chance to take a step. I think Chamberlain Campbell, he's going to be over on the Jared Ivey side as well, but he still had some growing to do. It'll be interesting to see how he does. Now, defensive line, it's not just returners and transfer portal, as Ole Miss had one of the best high school classes they have at defensive line in an extremely long time. When they brought in Kamarion Franklin, who has a chance to be that defensive end. I do not think he's going to play in the area that Princely Umanmielen plays. I think he is going to be on that Jared Ivey type track as well. So that's another player that I think will go over there. You have Jeremiah Brown, who was last year's big defensive line signing that I think redshirted a little bit, put on a little bit of weight. I think there's a chance he could rise up a little bit as well. You have Jeffrey Rush, who is an excellent defensive line prospect, and Cam Beavers as well. I just named a ton of players that Ole Miss has at their disposal on the defensive line in the front four that can be fighting for spots. We're talking 12 to 15 players that all have a legit chance to get into the rotation next season. Now, Pete Golding on defense, we talked about the offense doesn't rotate very much. The defense does. You don't have a starting unit of 11 players in college football anymore. Too much tempo, too much of different things that just makes that untenable. I think it's kind of a starting 22. So you want to get into that 22 thing to where you can get 20 to 50 snaps per game, to where you're trying to stay fresh. You're trying to avoid wearing down like Ole Miss did towards the end of last season a little bit. But if you can do that and you can make it to where the offense only has to score 20 points a game to win the game because you know how elite that defense can be, I think you're going to be special. With Walter Nolen, Princely Umanmielen, J.J. Pegues, Jared Ivey as a starting four, I would put that up against anybody in the Southeastern Conference and in the country, honestly. That backup four, Jamarius Brown, Xxavion Harris, Akelo Stone, Kamarion Franklin, DJ Holmes or TJ Dudley. Those positions, that is where the spring training is very important for the defensive line. Not necessary for the really young guys like Cam Beavers and Jeffrey Rush and those guys. But I think it's going to be big for Kamarion Franklin because he has a chance to really play because of his athletic ability, and the backups that are trying to get playing time because of what is coming up behind them as well. This defensive line has a chance to be very special, and that is going to make the defense even better. The defense only gave up like 24 points a game last year as well. That's absolutely weird thinking about an Ole Miss fan coming from where Wesley McGriff was to where we are now. We are at that point to where it's, hey, can we cut the defensive scoring down to about 17 to 18 points a game? Make it to where 20 points wins the game. If that happens, I don't know if Ole Miss is losing in 2024. It should be really interesting indeed. I'm really fired up about the defensive line because of all of that. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. We're just getting started. Some big-time prospects had big-time days at the Atlanta Under Armour Combine, and we will talk about it all next. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all the NBA players with teams like and such like quick bets, same game parlays. They have props that are very exclusive to the FanDuel brand and many, many more things. Actually, you know what? Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Locked On has launched its first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Also, a little show announcement as well. This weekend, we are doing our migration to a new podcast host. It will not affect you other than the fact that you're going to have a little bit of a service interruption while they migrate all of that over. Friday at about 2:30 to about Monday at noon, there will be nothing put up on the audio channel during that time. If we're putting out videos like we always do, you can check those out on YouTube. And then after Monday at noon, the videos for the weekend, the audio files will show up as well. So Chris Childers, Barrett Sallee, those people will show up after noon on Monday. If you want it a little bit earlier, you can check it out on the YouTube channel. Nothing's changing there. And it's not going to change any way of how you consume the podcast. It's still going to go straight into the feeds. But I just wanted to give everybody a heads up on that. This weekend is the migration as we do that. We've kind of outgrown our current podcast host. So we need to move on to do a little bit better. So thank you very much for that. Anyway, the Under Armour All-American Combine in Atlanta was this weekend, and there's some stories. There's some things that we need to talk about. And Mississippi players showed out. Akylin Dear got a Under Armour All-America Bowl invitation as well. Also, by the way, I'm interested in that jersey combination. I don't know. I get that it was on a visit and they took a picture of it and all of that, but I'm interested in those Navy helmets with the powder jerseys now. To me, that looks good. Now, those Navy helmets, I don't know if they can have the red stripe on it. They might want to try to do a powder stripe or something down the middle, but I think that looks pretty good. And down in the comments, let me know if I'm crazy, but I think that would be a pretty decent uniform combination for Ole Miss to break out and just have the white pants as well. I don't know. Just a thought. But Akylin Dear got the Under Armour All-American Bowl invite. Remember, I go to the Under Armour game every year. Ole Miss fans, there's going to be content there. And Mississippi prospects should probably go down there because you're going to have somebody talking about it from a Mississippi point of view as well. It wasn't the only running back that was there. You have Alvin Henderson, who is being recruited by Alabama, Auburn, Florida State, Miami, Ole Miss, Oregon, Penn State, basically everybody. He's a top 100 running back out of Alabama. The last time there was a really good running back out of Alabama, Ole Miss did a pretty decent job of recruiting him and got him in Quinshon Judkins. But this running back had nearly 4,000 yards rushing, like 60 touchdowns. I think he played small school type ball in Alabama, but he is an elite running back. If you watch him, he's unbelievably smooth, but it's just another running back that was showing out there. I didn't hear anything about the Under Armour All-American Bowl invite for him, so I think Akylin Dear may have outperformed him a little bit as well. When you look at other players that kind of stood up, you have Mario Nash from Kemper County, who got the offensive line MVP. He's been recruited by Ole Miss. He's been recruited by State. I think a lot of people are going to come into the state of Mississippi this year, and they're going to try and pluck prospects, for lack of a better word. Mississippi has gotten to the point where 12 to 17-ish 4-stars are coming out every year, and in that population, that's saying something. That tells me like Mike Espy and Shea Hodge are doing great work in Jackson. They're doing a decent job on the 7-on-7 tour, and there's a lot more people with eyeballs on Mississippi at the moment as well. Now, another thing that's interesting, they were talking about, got the dates wrong, I think, but Kevin Otis is going to the Under Armour Dallas Combine, I do believe. I don't know if he went to the Under Armour Atlanta, but Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, was in Atlanta. He said he was one of the players he was looking most forward to seeing was Kevin Otis because of a 285-pound defensive lineman who's rushing the passer well. That's rare. Should be really interesting to see exactly what goes on if he goes to the Under Armour Dallas camp, combine, whatever you want to call it. Now, this is an interesting thing. Adam Gorney says Notre Dame quarterback commit Duce Knight remains locked in with the Irish, but Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and others are not giving up. That is a real statement, okay? And I'm about to drop some severe hot takes here in just a second. I was talking with the Florida football scout, Brian Smith, on this weekend show. As everybody tuned in for that one, we talked about Jamie French in that show. So you can check that out. It was released Sunday. Go back and check that out on the YouTube channel. Actually, pretty good show. Duce Knight was brought up, and Brian Smith talked about he was curious if Duce Knight was going to go to the combine because Notre Dame commits because of their relationship that they had with Adidas back in the day. Now, I get that they're an Under Armour school now, but his relationship with Adidas means that people have been sending commits that direction. And commits have been going through the Army All-American Bowl or the All-American Bowl, whatever they call it, pretty consistently. So he was curious if the quarterback, Duce Knight, was going to go to the Under Armour Combine in Atlanta. Duce Knight showed up. He did, which tells me one thing. If that relationship has been happening, if all of that is true, he's more open than we know. I do not think that Duce Knight is ultimately going to sign with Notre Dame. I don't. Not even a little bit. They're going to be fired up about it. They're going to be really excited about it, but they're going to have to play defense for 10 months. Okay? 10 months. This is a Norreal White situation times 100. This is a Norreal White situation, but they're going to put everything into trying to take him away from Notre Dame. Notre Dame has the academics. They have all of that. Their coach is really cool. I like their colors. They have a lot going for them. One thing that they don't have going for them is they're not Alabama, that they're not Ole Miss for a kid from Lucedale, Mississippi, not even Mississippi State. It's kind of a cool thing to have the Notre Dame look on it, but I don't know at the end if they're going to be able to hang on with what's going on. I think in the end, whenever this all comes down to it, it's going to be an Ole Miss Alabama recruitment. And Notre Dame, I just feel like at the end of the day, they're going to end up on the outside looking in. Alabama and Akylin Dear sees him, Duce Knight, as Michael Penix 2.0. Alabama is going all in on this football player. When Alabama goes all in on a football player, how often do they miss out on that football player? I'm not even saying he's going to go to Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is going to recruit him all the way to the end because he is a program-changing type quarterback. He's Lamar Jackson. If you get to recruit Lamar Jackson, you recruit Lamar Jackson into your system. Alabama sees that as well. And as recruitment goes up and he goes through these combines, I think it's going to be increasingly difficult for a program like Notre Dame to hold on to him. I said what I said. It is what it is. I think Ole Miss and Alabama are probably going to be the last two standing with Duce Knight. I don't know if he's going to go there, but I do know that from talking to different people that Alabama's all in on this recruit. And when Alabama's all in on a recruit, it becomes a difficult way to hold on to him. And Ole Miss has the home state thing, but they do not have the closest school thing. Alabama is closer to Lucedale, Mississippi than Oxford, Mississippi. So we'll see how it goes. So that's my only take in this thing is I don't think Duce Knight is going to end up at Notre Dame. I think in the end, it's going to be an Ole Miss, Alabama type deal. So we'll see exactly what's up there. Still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss. You're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We do some group therapy after a meh weekend on the islands and why I think that the baseball season really opens versus Arkansas State. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn just isn't another job board. It's a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals that makes it the perfect place to hire because it gives you access to professionals that you can't find anywhere else. They do all of this while making the process easy and intuitive. And hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, 86% of small businesses get qualified candidates within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, they might not have the time to resources to hire. So it's no different than hiring a football coach. If you have the right guy, they can have a positive, measurable impact on your business. If you hire the right football coach, they can have you on the discussion for the playoffs. If you hire the wrong football coach, you could be doing this again in 3 years. And the difference is if you hire the wrong professional, you can end up doing this again in 3 weeks in the real world. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Should say Locked On College to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. Be part of history. So Ole Miss went to the islands this weekend. We had opening day. We did all the videos and all of the stuff. And they won the first game in like 13 innings, which was a terrible situation for a team that was probably flying 12, 14 hours, something like that to get to the Hawaiian Islands. You do that, you get there the day before, the next day you play 13 innings, your legs are gone. It's all over at that point. Ole Miss used every little bit of energy that they had left to win a game on the first game of the doubleheader. And at that point, they were officially out of gas. You can ask Tim Thomas and everybody else what plane travel and all that takes out of you, and going over there without having time for the body to adapt. I think it takes 4 days. There's some people that they're of the school of thought that if you get there and your body doesn't even know that it needs to adapt, you can get through 1 day. But if you have something that long, you're going through the body adapting process. Okay. It probably takes 4 to 5 days inside that time zone for your body to acclimate. And if you don't do that, your body is still going on central time zone. You're playing games at that point. You're playing games up until 5 o'clock in the morning. You're making it to the next day, playing a doubleheader, and fatigue just set in. You can tell that by the last game. Ole Miss had 6 errors. They walked a whole bunch of batters. They did the tough stuff that is typical of a team with massive fatigue. And whenever you fly westerly, it doubles the impact of the plane ride flight because the earth is spinning the other direction. If you've ever flown back from Europe, that's always worse than flying to Europe, in my opinion. So I am of the opinion that I can just chalk this up to a reward for all of the hard work during the offseason, a free trip to Hawaii. Hey, a couple of players played pretty well. Austin Simmons, I think, pitched an inning and had 2 strikeouts, just like he has all during inter squads. But Ole Miss going 2-2. We want sweeps. I get it. But there was a lot of stuff going against Ole Miss in this weekend. And part of that was that arrival time coming in. Ole Miss probably needed to be in Hawaii no later than Tuesday. And Ole Miss getting there Thursday night, something like that, flying all during the course of the day and then playing 13 innings the next day. That was just a recipe for fatigue and everything else with the body clock and all of that. So it just happens. Ole Miss did get 2, okay? Hawaii's a good team. I think they went 2-1 last year in the Big Ten tournament that Ole Miss was in. They beat Maryland a year ago. This is not a podunk team. This is not a loss to North Alabama. Understand all of that. Understand all the travel. Understand everything that was going against Ole Miss. And understand that the season probably starts against Arkansas State as midweek gets going. There's going to be games that Ole Miss needs to win. They need to play a little bit better. They need to hit the ball a little bit better. And we'll see exactly how that goes because I think they have High Point and then they have Iowa. So Ole Miss is slowly building up to a high-level series to get ready for SEC plays, which is always a bear. Always a bear. Now, I'm not saying that this weekend wasn't a disaster. This wasn't horrible. I'm saying that after Ole Miss won the national championship after being the last team in the field, I think that it's okay until we start worrying about Ole Miss not being able to make a regional. I think that's the line where you're starting to embark. I think Ole Miss needs to get in the tournament. That is the first step. And going 2-2 in Hawaii, they're still on track to do that as well. Is just a split series. I hate the fact that it was a 4-game series, but I get the fact that since you had to cross 5 time zones, that's the reason they needed to do that. So just the season starts with Arkansas State. We'll see how that goes for Ole Miss, but there was a lot of stuff going against Ole Miss baseball this past weekend. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. Everydayers, we have Barrett Salee and Chris Childers slated for this weekend. Remember, we're not putting out any audio files on the podcast channel from 2:30 on Friday until noon on Monday. The stuff that we do this weekend will have to be after noon on Monday. So be aware of that. You can catch it on the YouTube channel if you want to do that. So we have them slated for this weekend, and we wait on the most anticipated football season at Ole Miss ever, and you can hear about it all here. But for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today and YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.